some of our really long-term people. Oh, sorry. Okay. Some of our really long-term people who've been involved with language sciences, familiar faces that everybody in this room knows, and has been changing roles, and so first of all, like normally you would expect coming to an event like this, to see Ella standing up in front and running the show much more smoothly than I could and am. So first, I just really like to acknowledge Ella, who's moved on to become Ella's boss, appropriately, which is amazing because it means that Ella's going to continue to and has continued to stay connected with language sciences, but is now positioned to really do more, and so that's fantastic. And I want to just it's kind of silly to list anything that Ella's done because she's done so much. We'd be standing here all day, but at the risk of getting, I don't want to get emotional. So I will keep it brief. So Ella, really was has absolutely transformative in working on our becoming a G-Rex Institute, on all of the and prior to that on the GCRC grants, the research cluster grants that sort of got us to that point. Film screenings and financial planning and all of the stuff that got done. Really, Ella was behind so much of the doing, and providing support to all of us and all of you. So really, I just want to really thank you, Ella, for all the amazing time, and yeah, thank you. So, and the next person is Christine actually with us? She's not, okay. So Christine was going to be here at our originally scheduled time, and then we had to reschedule and so on, as you all know. But Christine, and she's up here, so with us in sort of image, if not in reality. But so Christine Schreier at UBCO was, while I was away on leave last year, was our interim co-director, and just amazing in that short time, all the things that she was able to support and get done. In particular, she worked with Janet to help build our International Advisory Board. She established the UBC Okanagan version of the Living Language course that is now taught on both campuses. And just in general, making connections between UBCO and UBCV that we just really never could have done without her. So I know she's not here, but please let's, yeah, thanks to Christine. So very, thank you. And last, of course, I'm really at risk of getting emotional here, so I'm going to keep it quick. So Janet, and I know this is not like, in none of these cases is this like a goodbye or anything, because Janet's still, so Janet Worker, of course, I don't need to introduce Janet. She's still remained engaged and is here today as a panelist, and it's amazing. But just to say a few things, I mean, just starting this language sciences project together with Janet, I mean, has been such a just unadulterated pleasure for me personally, and yeah, I just yeah, really am grateful for the opportunity to have worked with you, and yeah, just so closely over so many years to have such an opportunity to just create and just have fun, and I just had so much fun and joy, and every stupid meeting with administrators and whatever, all the things that we did, it was just fun all the time, and at least for me, I'm maybe it wasn't for you, but it was. I just had a great time, and Janet, just a few things. Janet took the lead on all of our really GCRC grants. I think it's fair to say on the the research cluster grant and the GREX grant, and the massive literacy SSHRC partnership grant, and designed and co-taught our living language course across many different faculties at the university, which was a massive, massive undertaking. So, and so many other things. And just Jen and I really just so appreciate your vision and guidance to us all. So really appreciate it. Thank you, Jenna. Yeah. So, okay. So I'll moving on to other new changes that are, you know, kind of the changes that have come out of that. One of the really exciting things for me is that what this has meant is that now we have Dr. Guofeng Li, who has now joined us as our new co-director of language sciences. And Guofeng is, you know, has already taken up this post and has already hit the ground running. So this has been, she's been in that role, but this is really her first sort of public appearance, if you will, as co-director. So I'm just really delighted to introduce Dr. Li. And she is, as most of you probably know, a distinguished professor at UBC FEE's Language and Literacy Education Department, Tier 1 Canada Research Chair in Transnational and Global Perspectives of Language and Literacy Education of Children and Youth, and just has been a really valuable, longstanding member of the steering committee in language sciences, has been very active, and is aiming to, in her research, improve the life success of immigrant and minority students, breaking down cultural, linguistic, instructional, and structural barriers. So really important work for language sciences and for UBC. So if I could introduce Guofeng Li. So thanks a lot.
Thank you very much. And as Brian noted, I'm already in the co-director role, but I wasn't new to language sciences. I've been heavily involved since the beginning of language science with Janet and Brian and many others. So I just want to mention my, during my job talk, I said I will do 4 things with Brian and with students. One is closer engagement with education, particularly the faculty of education is here and the faculty of school education in Okanagan, and particularly in K-12 schools. I'm already having some conversations with different various education sectors, see what areas we can collaborate. So I'm still working on that. If you have ideas, please, this is more invitation to your ideas and your participation. And then the second one is the increase interdisciplinary collaboration and cooperation. Even like today, you know, I'm hoping to pursue more ideas in progress conversations so that we can have from different disciplines coming together, get to know what we're working on. I know many of us in academia always work in silos, right? We're very familiar with our area of work, but how do we branch out and learn about other people's work and how to collaborate. And the third aspect is enhancing our EDID, especially in terms of cross-program preparation of junior scholars, especially doctoral students, and even starting masters and doctoral, and then early career members of background. And lastly, I want to hopefully increase our policy and public engagement, especially working on how to better communicate our research findings to research users and to community members, and also how do we really influence K-12 language and education policies from language science perspective. So I invite you to give me more ideas and participate in our future events. Thank you.
Great, thanks so much. We've got, I don't want you to have to listen to me too much. So we've got some slides I'd like to sort of use, just kind of introduce the ideas behind some of the things that we're talking about today. So just again, just to give you a little bit, there was a slide that was up that just to quickly give you an idea of the structure of the event. Some food first, some thanks and introductions, and some slides, and then we're going to have a panel. And all of this is going to be around this idea of major funding. And major funding to a degree, and then at the end we'll have some just Q&A and chance to mingle and talk and generate ideas and so on. So the idea with major funding really is, I mean, on the one hand, UBC, from UBC's perspective, you know, we exist to generate money, which, you know, to be just perfectly like frank, you know, from UBC's perspective, you know, that's what's going to keep us in business, and that's all fine. But from the researcher's perspective, we're not here to generate money. We're here to do great research, and the whole point is that together, we're going to be able to do more and better research than we could do individually. That's really why we're here, right? That's why all of us are in this room, and if you're here for any other reason, you know, anyway. So you know, just to think about, you know, we've got this circle and stuff, and you know, it's got, you know, you've seen this in some of our in some of our materials before. I'm sure you've seen it on the website if you've been around for very long, and you know, these circles and things look nice in grant applications and all this stuff. But what this represents is that, you know, we come from different disciplines, but we all represent a single structure, right? And we're here to cross those disciplines so that we can tackle bigger questions. That's why we're here. And to be able to do that, this is why major funding becomes important, right? So that is to say, like, when Janet, for example, pulled together the literacy grant, Janet was saying, you know, we've got this literacy in a digital world. It's like this massive problem, right? Who could tackle that? Well, Janet Worker. But, right, but what one person could tackle that, right? Even Janet Worker couldn't tackle that alone, right? And, you know, so it's only by pulling together a bunch of people and saying to a granting agency, look, we need funding to do this. We need support. Let's get together and do this, right? And we've, you know, thinking of just a few of the kind of things that have come up in conversations, you know, thinking of immigration and language. I've already today had several conversations with people about immigration and language. You know, large language models and generative AI and ethics and what to do next, you know, how to interpret this, where are we going with this? Who's going to take the lead on this if not language sciences? And within language sciences, who's going to take the lead on this? You know, that's a real question. You know, think about that. Think about what your role is in each of these things, right? Brain-to-speech synthesis. We're right on the cusp of being able to translate brain signals into speech, which, I mean, think about, you know, from, you know, just a medical point of view, just from a, you know, improving life quality point of view, like, you know, it's just incredible. And it's also rife with ethical issues and so on. Every single, you know, every single point of interface between these different disciplines generates questions on this scale. These are 4 questions, not because those are the 4 most important questions by any means. There's all kinds of stuff. There's, you know, indigenous language endangerment and revitalization. There's, you know, huge issues that touch on everything, you know, on the things that everybody in this room sort of touches on that in their work. Every single person. And so I really hope that one thing that we can do as we're, you know, I don't want to get sort of lost in the weeds of thinking about like major funding because we care about funding, because we don't, right? So it just, you know, I want to plant the seed if I can for, so today, if one person leaves the room today and says, wow, you know, I could see myself doing that, or even if I weren't like the PI, I could see myself, you know, I'm a student, what can I do? Well, I can pull together the people I know, my supervisor and this other faculty member doing interesting stuff. I can start to bring some things together, and we can do something bigger. So next slide, if I could. So just a few kind of examples of some of the opportunities that are out there, just to kind of get you thinking about the space of major funding. So we've got, like, we're all familiar with the tri-agencies, SSHRC, NSERC, CIHR, and the tri-agencies, every one of the tri-agencies has, you know, individual faculty member-sized grants, but they also have bigger grants, and that's like the SSHRC Partnership Grant, for example. And thinking about how to build, how to work your way up to something like that is kind of, you know, one of the things that we can think about today. There are other, so like the CFI, for example, an infrastructure grant, that's not for operating stuff, it's for stuff. So it's not for hiring people so much. There's a major infrastructure operation grant, but there's also operation fund. There's also the GELF grants, which usually are end up funding new faculty members. So if you're a faculty member in your first 2 years, or if you know a faculty member in their first 2 years after being hired, they should be applying for a GELF. That's going to, you know, kickstart careers, get a lab set up, whatever is needed. So be in touch with us if we can support that kind of process in any way, if you know somebody who's just coming in. Other major sources, things like government agencies, industry grants, international grants like Horizon Europe that was just announced. Huge granting opportunity, the NIH. It's American, but but Canadians can apply for it. So lots of things out there in the world that we can be thinking about, you know, space agency and so on. And then there's non-government foundations. You know, that's probably the thing that I know the least about in terms of major grant funding. And it's also something, there are people in the room who know a lot about that, but also the Faculty of Arts, for one, has hired really just this week, right? Has just made a decision, or very recently anyway, this month certainly, has just hired a new foundations grant facilitator. I don't know exactly what the title of that role is, but they'll be working with Ella. And so if you're interested in those opportunities, we can figure out through Ella who the relevant person is, make those connections, and get those conversations started. Okay, so that's just kind of a little bit of a lay of the land in terms of the kinds of opportunities that are available. So it's not just, I can apply for my SSHRC or I can apply for my NSERC, right? It's bring people together. All of these involve groups of people applying together. Those groups of people very often span different disciplines, often different universities, and often different sectors. So, you know, community partners, industry partners, government partners, and so on. Next. Okay, so I guess we have a Slido question for everybody. So I think that means take a snapshot of the screen and do the QR code thing and answer the question do you want to take the lead on this part, or is that?
No.
Okay.
This one that they just.
Okay, so what kind of projects would you be interested in getting major grants for? And answer that question. Great, okay. So more than half of you are more interested in starting a new collaborative project. That's fantastic. And a bunch of others are interested in working with industry or community partners, expanding an existing project into a more collaborative project. All of these all of these are important, viable pathways, right, to doing something, to taking your research to the next level. So I'll leave it at that, and Guofeng, I think, is going to take over the next little bit.
So, language science can help you with all those desires.
Here, here.
Yeah. Next slide, please. So we can support indirect cost for your application. Indirect costs are examples like paying, not for your everyday lunch, but for your meeting. You can invite, like, the cost for inviting speakers and for team meetings, and then GAA salaries for preparing your application. And also, if you need to produce some materials, such as briefs, reports, infographics, you can support that as well. So we can support basically a broad range of activities leading to your major grant funding. We also provide other support, for example, funding advice. Many of our members are very experienced, so we also have resources to reach out for funding advice if you have a project that's not like, that's a very unique or cutting edge project that may be not obvious in terms of funding sources. We can also suggest on connecting you with community partners and different organizations that you need some support in that area. We also can provide administrative support. Whatever you need, talk to us. And lastly, we have seed funds for new initiatives. So we are providing a lot. We're really able to provide a lot of kind of support for your major. And the next one. And then you probably say, well, how do you evaluate those proposals? Would you need to submit proposals? So one is that interdisciplinary or cross-disciplinary, which we can really easily see from your team. If you have contributions from multiple departments or programs or units, and that's a good sign for interdisciplinarity. And another thing is that, you may have been already working on a team, but you're now forming new teams and new directions, and you have new kind of compositions for the team. So that's another way we look at. Another is that we are very, as we noted, that we are very committed to IB initiatives. So if your team, for example, include BIPOC scholars or junior scholars, so state that. And also, preferably, not just your team members, but your research actually related to or have outcome for EDA. And lastly, of course, as all proposals, you have to be clear. You have to have clarity in writing. What is your project is about, and what is your budget, and those kind of very generic and whatever proposal. So talk to us if you're thinking about it, you're interested in our support. Next slide, please.
Okay, so I'm going to ramp it up a little bit in terms of speed. So I think we can, so just again, a few examples. We've already mentioned the Janet's SSHRC Partnership Grant. Sid Fells has just submitted a couple of grants. Lara Boyd is a co-investigator on that, as am I, in those grants from electrical and computer engineering. One having to do with brain-to-speech that I already mentioned. I was the lead on our last year's CFI, big CFI sort of infrastructure grant that was not successful. But I say that because I wanted to bring that up because a lot of times you apply for these massive grants and it's not successful and it's a ton of work, and that's okay. And I have to say that I learned so much from going through that process that a lot of ideas really coalesced for me around what we can do next. And so, we'll move on. We'll keep keep pushing into new opportunities. So I just wanted to make sure that was up there so everybody's aware that like this doesn't always work, and we just keep working, and it's all good. So next slide, please. So many major funding applications require partnership with a non-academic partner, community, not-for-profit industry. Have you worked with an industry partner before, or a community, not-for-profit, or industry partner before? Any of the above? In your research? Okay, great. So as you keep answering, I think what we'll probably see is more of the same emerging. Most of us have done some kind of have had some kind of research-related interaction with some kind of a non-academic partner. I didn't know whether that would be 50-50 or whatever, but that's really encouraging. And for the remaining few who haven't, the minority who haven't, all the people in the room become resources, right? So who have become resources for making connections, and that is one of the really important things about doing some of these bigger projects, is that you very often, as I say, have to have are expected to have relationships outside of UBC, outside of academia. Next slide. Okay, so as an example of something that Language Sciences is doing, I wanted to this is a little bit of a launch moment to tell you about a new project that we're doing. This is called the Synergy Program, and this is a pipeline that where we're collaborating between Language Sciences and the Master of Data Science and Computational Linguistics, for which I need to thank Garrett for putting in a lot of time and effort on that as well. So just to give an example of kind of what we mean when we say pipeline, the MDSCL program, because it's a professional program that fosters connections with industry partners who do capstone projects with MDSCL students every year. We have been building this body of relationships with industry partners, government, NGOs, communities, doing projects with data science of language, and those projects, those relationships, we've not been doing a lot with those relationships, and the partners often want to do more, and so what we're starting to do then is to take some of the resources of language sciences and the energy of language sciences, pull those things together and say, okay, what would we need to do more with that? So for example, I think one of the main things that would need to happen, you would need a UBC partner, a faculty member, most likely in most cases, to step up and say, hey, that's interesting, that project they're doing on that education app that they're working on, or that low resource language AI, or that law application, or whatever it is. If you're in language sciences and you're thinking about your research and you see a project come up, language sciences can communicate those projects, communicate who those partners are to our membership, and then so we can announce that there's a potential new partner and talk about what that project might be that they're interested in doing. We can find a PI to match up, a faculty member PI to match up. Could be anyone, anywhere in the university, any faculty member in any faculty in the university, and to set up a meeting and start to think about, well, what could we do to get a little grant? And these a little short grant requires no money from the industry partner, no money from UBC. It's just SSHRC. We'll give you a little bit of money to hire some students to get a project going, or to keep a project going once a capstone has finished, right? So we've got a relationship, we're building a relationship. We're just talking about how can we take that and turn it into a relationship that is between somebody who wants to continue to develop that relationship. And then, language sciences can provide seed funds or other kind of support to grant applications. The approval rating for those small industry partnership grants is insane. So, your likelihood of getting getting funding if you apply with an industry partner for one of those small grants is, I don't want to say a number because it'll sound unrealistic, but the numbers that I've heard from the people who are in a position to know are just unbelievable. So, it's very likely that you would be able to get a project going and to then keep a project going. And then if you think about that, once we've got, say, we've got how many new projects, how many new partners do we have, new projects do we have going on every year? So we're going to have something like a dozen new projects a year with new partners every year coming on, right? So how many partners, so Janet, how many, from your perspective with the SSHRC Partnership Grant, how many, and if this has been funded by SSHRC, how many partners would we need to do, say, to put in for a SSHRC Partnership Grant, right? So if you've got maybe over a couple of years, we pick the best projects, pull them together and put in a SSHRC Partnership Grant, right? So in other words, find the ones that are really working and the ones that are thematically tying together and think about what that theme is and say, all right, we can do something bigger with this. Then we're really, right, then we've got something that's going to continue and grow and start to really address some of those really big questions that the individual researchers, the individual companies aren't going to be doing on their own. So, okay, so I'm excited about that new program. So I just wanted to unveil that with you all here today. And that's one of the things that's going to be coming up in the context of our panel discussion, because Garrett is going to be one of the members of the panel. And with that, I'd like to introduce Garrett and ask you to come up and join the panel. So Garrett is an assistant professor of teaching in linguistics and the MDSCL director, and has been just doing a bang-up job with that in that role as MDSCL director, growing the program and so on. And there's lots of information up there about Garrett. Is there anything you wanted to say before we get started with the panel?
I know all the stuff with ChatGPT and language models is terrifying to everybody. But I'm not complaining, so I apologize, but I'm not complaining. But it's really an opportunity for more cross-disciplinary work and collaboration. I think there are a lot of opportunities out there. So I'm really excited to
Great, thanks so much. And our next panelist that I'll introduce is Janet Werker. And again, Janet needs no further introductions. But Janet, is there anything that you want to say about that might not be part of the panel?
Just, I want to reiterate what Ryan said, that a lot of the times these big grant applications don't work. They're not successful, but what you learn from them really enriches what you do next. And they're worth it. And then when they do come together, it's like.
It is amazing. Thanks so much.
Come talk anytime.
I'll leave you with the microphone because, well, the next one goes to. So our third panelist can't be here today. We did have 5 chairs here originally, but Amanda Cardoso was going to be a third panelist for us, and speaking from the perspective of a lecturer and what she's been able to do in pulling together ideas, workshops, and so on that lead to bigger collaborations. But yeah, I'm afraid she wasn't able to be here at the last minute. And Lara Boyd, I'm really excited to introduce Lara. Lara, professor in physiotherapy, director of the Brain and Behavior Laboratory, and I don't have all the accolades up here on the slide, so I can't list them all, but there are so many, and you should check them out. Plus, I think the third most viewed TED Talk on YouTube, if I'm not mistaken. Blew my mind, right? I mean, so if you haven't seen Lara's TED Talk, if you haven't seen it, you're in the minority. So get caught up, watch her TED Talk. She's amazing.
I don't need to say anything else, but I don't think the mic's on the hand.
This mic. Oh, okay. Whoops.
Oh, I'm sorry. But I did.
The mic is on, but I don't think it's working, so we're working.
Okay,
Trying.
all right.
Yes,
Okay, yeah.
we're trying, sorry.
There you go. Okay, well, I won't need that. Yeah. Yeah, we'll need a working mic for the panel. There we go. Did you want to say anything at
I'll
all?
chime in as we go. It's fine.
Okay, okay. Lara's gonna chime in as we go. And is mine not working? Mine's working again. Okay. Okay, and our last panelist and bookending this part of the event is Mark Turin. And welcome, Mark. Again, Mark doesn't need any further introduction, I think. But again, thanks for joining the panel, Mark. And Mark, is there anything you wanted to?
Nothing at all.
Okay, perfect. Okay. All right, so I'll give you this.
Okay.
I seem to, it's my favorite activity is dropping.
So I have some questions for you guys. So I know you have done a lot since beginning, but I wanted to bring you back to your first experience in securing major grant funding. What it was like when you first started your first project?
We need to pass it down. Do we have a working mic? Okay, maybe. Pass around the lapel.
Okay. So from a funding perspective, I'm a bit new to this. Fairly new faculty member, but I know in my grad studies I was applying for funding for my program, and it was intimidating. I know that being able to or try to put a project together that could convince other experts that yes, this is worth actually funding and putting together was something that was something that I just didn't know quite how to start with it. But getting experience from people that were more experienced really did help me. And is this working? Yeah, all right, great. Yeah, and yeah, it works. So like Brian said, I've had failed applications as well. They do hurt, but it's great when you can get a project going and get the funding for it. It validates that you are doing really important work.
Yeah. So the first one was not successful. The first major one was a Human Frontiers science application. And it was an amazing team that I'd been brought on to, and I got to know people and maintained connections with them, even though it wasn't successful. But then we went on to 2 successful Human Frontiers grants because we learned so much from the first failure. And those were some of the funnest things. And even though they're partners elsewhere, they have to be different universities, different countries, different disciplines. You have enough money in those. You have more money each year than we have in the SSHRC Partnership Grant across 7 years to have a local team as well. So those were, I think, really amazing, and I'll stop there.
Yeah, so I was really fortunate for my first kind of major grant as a new faculty member. I was in the States at the time, it was before I was recruited here, but I got to be part of an NIH funded training program for grantsmanship and grants priorities. And it's something that I would love us to replicate here. So if you indulge me, I want to take 2 minutes and describe how it works. So as a new PI starting a lab, I was able to apply to be a part of this program. I was paired with a senior mentor from another institution from across the country. We worked offline to kind of think through some ideas, to kind of rough sketch a grant. And then there was a week-long retreat where all of the senior mentors were brought together with these junior people, And we went through grants workshops. We had people from the major funding agencies come in and talk to us. We met the grants officers from NIH. And by the end of that week, I had an NIH grant, which was successful. It was a relatively small one. I started small. And so I know, way to ruin your career because then you think you're going to get, right? And it's not always that successful, but it was an amazing model. And I was able to build connections with this senior mentor to understand the agencies. So sometimes I think that's the biggest impediment because they have such weird cultures, each of them. And then to have someone, really to bounce these ideas off of. And those networks have carried through for many years. If we had any kind of like pile of money laying around, even if we could replicate something like that internally, and it's kind of what we try to do with Spark, but on a bigger basis, it would be an incredible way to kind of ignite. Yeah, I was really lucky. The program runs to this day in the States. So if you're in a rehab research field, you can go from Canada. We could probably find something where we could send some of our people, but it's food for thought.
Thank you for the question. And rather like Janet, the first big grant I applied for in the UK, I didn't get either. And I was advised to really rethink about explaining why what I do might be interesting to people who didn't know they were interested, right? Because I just took a priori the baseline being everyone's interested in this stuff. And of course they're not. You're competing with, everybody and their mother. And the trick, of course, then is to make kind of better mistakes each time. It's hubris to think we'll make none, but just kind of improve the quality of your mistakes. I also will say the first grants I got in the UK and the US were from being in a non-tenure track position. And that's quite hard as well to navigate. In addition, I didn't know really about the overhead costs that universities can levy. We're fortunate in Canada that Tri-Council grants, overheads don't come out of the grant, they're on top of, and the university gets them at the end of the year. But in the UK and the US, most grants have large overheads. And I was applying to foundations where overheads are kind of very squeezable. And I was at Yale at the time, and I asked what the overhead cost was, and they said 69% of the grant. And I said, that strikes me as a little outrageous. Why? And they said, because we can. I'm done.
What else could you say?
Well, that's a very good point to lead to our other questions. Like, besides all those lessons that you learn, what other lessons you want to offer and advice offer to someone who is just starting to think about applying for a major grant? Start with you, Mark.
Since I've got it, I did make a couple of notes. Like voting, you should vote often and vote early. Same with working with Spark. Spark and Arts ISIT, I think, are the two kind of diamonds in our university. Spark is a fantastic unit of people deeply committed to working with researchers to just strengthen and consult and reconsult and send it out for review and offer advice on budgets and things. So I found having this team of people in research services to be invaluable. So definitely lots of that. And I mean, all of these things, careful planning, it's so important. The grants that I've done well with are ones that were kind of cooking in me for some time. And then I started early. You know what they say about Noah and the ark? He didn't build it when it was raining already. He started before the rain started. So we should do the same with our grants. Don't see the announcement, the deadline, and then think, oh God, I better start now. It's important to do that first. And I would say the other main lesson I have is build the team and the project will come. My experience has been working with the people you want to work with and building a compelling set of researchers who can address the topic. You'll have infinite numbers of things you can explore, but don't retrofit the team onto the project. I personally like to start with a team and then find a project that suits us well. So.
So I can echo a little bit about Spark. So I was a health research advisor at UBC for 6 years, and in that capacity worked really closely with Spark. So the most important statistic you should know about them is if your grant goes through Spark review, your success rate doubles. Yeah. So I don't know what else to say. So, if you're thinking about going from 16 to 32% with the CIHR grant. That's well worth starting a couple weeks earlier so you can get their feedback. When I think about major projects, one of the issues I think we have in Canada is we don't have a lot of big money to go for. So what I've done in my work often is I scaffold grants together. So, you know, I almost will always start with a foundation or philanthropic money. That's to fund ideas that seem nutty that everyone's like, well, why would you do that? So a great example of that is Janet and I have the Peter Wall Opera Project. We're just about to finish up here in the next few months. There's no agency in Canada that would have given us money to study what opera does to the brain. No matter how nicely we wrote it or the best team or the, you know, there's just not going to happen. Now we're going to have, oh no, like 14. We already have 8 or 9. We'll have near 20 publications at the end of a somewhat COVID extended grant timeline. And now we look really fundable. So you can start with something like that. In my work, I often start with NSERC money because it's the easiest to get, but it's not enough money for a major, and then you scaffold up. So that's the other way to kind of approach this and kind of work your way into a position and building the team as you go, as the grants get bigger and you add until you have something kind of large that you can really go after. So, because I think it can feel daunting if you think about just going for a huge grant right out of the box. So you certainly don't have to do that. And you can still get a lot of money, a lot of work done, or you can have multiple small grants and have them really all coming together.
Yeah, I mean, I would like to echo what both Mark and Laura said. Spark, I would not have put the SSHRC Partnership Grant in without Spark sending me an email and saying, you know, as one of the co-directors of language sciences, we assume you're going to want to present your ideas for a SSHRC partnership grant. And I'm like, yes, of course. And so, I mean, it came from Spark, and they were incredibly helpful. I guess, yeah, definitely scaling up. Definitely using one source of funding to support another. So for the SSHRC Partnership Grant, with my funding from that plus other funding, I hired a postdoc to work on the SSHRC Partnership Grant work. Then she got a Banting to support her salary. And now I put in a SSHRC, just an insight grant, but with 4 other members of the SSHRC Partnership Grant team as co-investigators so that we can really take that across sites. So, but again, multiple sources of funding supporting the same thing or branches of the same bigger research question, because no source really ever supports it well. Finding people you can work with. So life is short and you want to have collaborators on your team that you're going to look forward to seeing every day. Something I learned over the years, because I have been part of a lot of group grants, is that it's also important to make sure that your team members are people who come through. So if you hear that somebody, no matter how perfect they seem as a fit, doesn't come through when they're part of a team, that's going to be a weak link that's going to make your grant not successful. So having it as a high priority, and sometimes I think we shouldn't ask the busiest people in the world, but if it's a high priority for them, we should. But not just the busiest people in the world, not just for equity reasons, but just because it's also really fun to have, you know, the mentoring aspect where people are just like eager for the opportunity and really bringing new ideas and new energy. So the team, everything about the team is really important. And I think that's one reason the SSHRC Partnership Grant is working so well, is everybody pulls their weight. It's amazing. Okay.
Yeah, so I guess all I have to add is a little bit about actually picking the right grant for what you're working on. I come from a computer science background, and through a lot of my grad studies, I was applying to NSERC for specific grants, and then I was working in language stuff. I was thinking, oh, great, I can apply to NSERC and SSHRC, and But really, my supervisor had to scale back to, no, this is a SSHRC project. This is an NSERC project. This is doing something that this granting agency is much more interested in and more likely to, you're more likely to be successful on this. So if you can find successful grants that have been funded by these agencies, it'll give you a lot of information and increase your chance of getting the grant accepted.
Do you have any advice for,
Yeah.
to add to that? Do you have any advice for people who are interested in the synergy thing?
Yeah. So a lot of times the partners, the industry partners, maybe don't have any experience applying to these types of grants. They're often not even aware that that they exist out there. So yeah, being able to find things. I know working with several small companies, they really can't afford to do an in-kind contribution, for example. So finding a grant where they don't have to supply and just say, no, you can get a student to work on, with you on this project. It's not going to cost you. That's something that I know a lot of them have been very interested in. If I were to say, well, we have this great grant proposal, but it's going to cost you $15,000 to join it, they're just going to walk away from it and lose an opportunity. So yeah, know what the partner wants as well in these types of projects.
Thank you. Seems like I learned a lot. Thank you very much. I believe that the audience will have a lot of questions. We're not going to do the ordinary Q&A. We're going to ask the panelists to sit at the table and you can come and have a little chat with them. So thank you very much. I have more questions, but I think we're running out of time. So just pick a table to sit and then
Sure.
people who are interested in particular grants to talk to them. Yeah, sure.
And for our panelists, before we break up, I just really want to say
Thank you.
thanks to the panelists for joining us. You'll also notice that there are little cards on the table. So when you're sitting at a table chatting with a panelist or chatting with each other, if an idea comes up or a question comes up, just jot it down and jot your name or whatever, and let's be in touch. So we're going to do a picture quickly.